Hello, everyone. Welcome to this final day of the EOSC Core Marketplace Provider Days. We have 3 more sessions lined up for you today. This one is the Science Clusters and Research Infrastructure as EOSC Providers one. Next, we have a session for commercial providers, and then we're closing with a session for national infrastructures. Thank you all for getting up to be here on time. We do notice that this is definitely the session where people show up later, so thank you all for being here. This session will focus on how clusters and research infrastructures can be providers in EOSC and the work that has been done there, working together with these groups. And introducing this session and specifically the combination, the work between clusters and EOSC is Christos Arvanitidis. He's the CEO of the Lifewatch ERIC and the CEO and the research director of the Hellenic Center for Marine Research, Institute of Marine Biology, Biotechnology and Aquaculture, with his research mainly focusing on marine biodiversity, biodiversity informatics, functional diversity and coastal ecosystems. And he's also very active in the EOSC Future project, where he works on our science projects that specifically work together between EOSC and the science clusters. So Christos, the floor is yours. There's one thing I forgot to mention, which I forget to mention each time, which is that we are collecting your inputs via Slido. So you can see the QR code and the link here, but we'll definitely also post that in the chat so that you can copy paste it for there. And we're very much looking forward to your inputs there. Thank you, Christos. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this kind invitation. It's a real pleasure and an honor, for all of us in EOSC Future to be here and to be able to promote and demonstrate the work which has been planned and is being, carried out right now. I'm going to talk, very briefly on the EOSC Future project, which is the place where the science clusters meet the infrastructure. This is a huge challenge, and it turns out that it needs a lot of work for everybody, and this is where we are right now. Sally, can I have the second slide, please? We have this European Open Science Cloud infrastructure, and in order to be developed, there are 2 basic components: the science clusters and the infrastructures. The first ones, they bring the scientific hypothesis to be tested. Normally, these are questions of global societal interest, and these are large issues like the pollution, like the climate change, like the loss of biodiversity, etc., etc. They also bring both the data and the services that are needed in order to do the science, to do the research. We are always talking about research carried out in silico here. And they also bring the communities, which are the members of the scientific communities that they need, to sit together and work together. On the other side, the infrastructures they bring, or if they are not in place, in some cases they develop the technology, which is missing. They build the platform, so all of those data and services can be accessed, or they can be deployed, onboarded, integrated, and then they integrate the resources with the EOSC platform, and that's a multiple stage process here. The next slide, please. Now, in the EOSC Future Work Package 6, we have the integration of community services and products into EOSC. So this is the real place where science clusters and the infrastructures join forces. However, we have different approaches. We use different languages, and we have different culture. For example, just imagine that a scientist starts, from a hypothesis and then he tries, to test this hypothesis, and either he rejects or accepts the hypothesis depending on the results of his research. The engineer, on the other side, who is the average person of the average scientist of the infrastructures, takes a very different approach. Normally, they start from where it is available, what it is available, where it is, how it can be implemented into the platform, etc., etc. However, there is a huge potential through the integration of our activities by identifying our interfaces of collaboration or our trading zones. These are the most fertile spaces for the development of new knowledge and also innovation. Next slide, please. We are fortunate enough in the biodiversity and ecosystem sciences to have somehow tackled this big challenge, which we call, cultural challenge. And this has to do with our communities. And the big challenge is how to direct most of the scientific effort, which is currently carried out through a single core operation. We call this brainetics, and to turn them to work on high performance brain network synthesis or brainomics. Next, please. Also, this means that we are promoting the multidisciplinary research, but also cross-domain research. Why? Because the research that is being carried out by multiple disciplines and multiple domains is more synthetic and therefore is undeniable. So here is, for example, a network that comes out of the publications all over the world that shows, how close are the different domains. And we have, a similar approach. You will see, in a minute, in the work packet 6. Next slide, please. In order to have a little bit more deep understanding how that works, actually, we bring here, the example of the common theory, which has been proposed by E.O. Wilson. E.O. Wilson is the father of the biodiversity concept. So he coined the term consilience, the unity of knowledge, and in fact, he means, this term as literally a jamming together of knowledge by the linking of the facts and the fact-based theories across the disciplines and across, of course, the domains to create a common ground of explanation. So that's very important. We built, first of all, the ground against which we're going to test our future hypothesis. And then that leads to the synthetic biology. Well, that could be, extended to synthetic knowledge. So that means looking for knowledge stemming out of evidence from as many disciplines in biology as possible to understand and explain the complex systems in order to sustainably use the resources of our planet. Next slide, please. That's what we do actually in Work Packet 6 with 10 big science projects. We create through them the cross-domain, the multidisciplinary interfaces, our trading zones. You can see in this graph the 5 big science clusters: embryos, life, panos, escape, and shock, and also how they are collaborating on their interfaces in order to carry out those 10 science projects. So the science projects are, so to say, big hypotheses, scientific hypotheses brought into the EOSC platform in order to help to develop the EOSC platform and also to bring the scientific communities to work. And when we talk about scientific communities, we are talking about scientific communities from multiple disciplines. That means that the people, they have to sit together and they have to work together. They have to harmonize their data. They have to harmonize the way that their services, the analytical services, work, and therefore to produce the scientific results. Meanwhile, that means a lot of challenges from the engineering point of view, and this is where we are right now. Briefly, the next slide, please. There are, as I said, two big science projects proposed by each of the science clusters. The ENVRI has the climate change impact on biodiversity and ecosystems in Europe. We use the non-invasive species as an example, their impacts on biodiversity and ecosystem, and also the dashboard for the state of the environment. EOSC Life brings two cases, two science projects which have which deal, with the pandemic. The first one is health, societies, and environment, which brings SHOCK and EOSC Life together. And the second one is about the metadata findability and the interoperability in EOSC imaging data. The next ones are ESCAPE on dark matter and extreme universe and gravitational waves, PANOSC, which is on tracing biostructures and dynamics of biological processes, and finally SHOCK, which brings two more science projects. The first one is on the climate neutral and smart cities and access management for distributed research infrastructures. The next slide shows the way that these things may happen. This is the way, schematically, in which we mean the integration of the resources. And there are two broad ways for the resources to be integrated. One is the vertical one, which is to integrate the resources on the EOSC core platform. And this is a set of multiple services, such as federated AAI, monitoring, accounting, help desk, etc., etc. And the other dimension is the horizontal integration, or the horizontal composability, as we mean it, which is make the services able to communicate to each other and to be able to integrate it into pipelines of work or otherwise workflows. Next slide, please. A workflow look like this. So we have import files, we have services in which taking over the analysis of the data from the import files. We may have several circles of analysis, and finally we have an output file. Everything is containerized, so it can be run in any platform after this kind of work. So it brings a lot of transparency, and it brings, of course, repeatability, which are the cornerstones of our research and scientific making knowledge. Next one is I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I'll stay here for your questions.
Okay, thanks a lot, Christos. Next up, we have another presentation by Sally Chambers. Sally is here to present to you her experience and general experience in the humanities and social science experience in onboarding services to EOSC. Sally was appointed to the DARIAH-EU Board of Directors in March of this year, and prior to that, she was the Digital Humanities Research Coordinator at the Ghent Center for Digital Humanities, where she was also the national coordinator for DARIAH Belgium and chair of the DARIAH-EU National Coordinator Committee. Since late 2020, she also works at the Belgian Royal Library, where she coordinates the Data KBRBE project that facilitates data level access to the Royal Library's digitized and born digital collections for digital humanities research. So I'm very much looking forward to this presentation myself. I'm hoping you are too. Sally, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much indeed for Catherine, and welcome this morning to everybody from KBR Royal Library of Belgium. So yes, this morning I'm going to sort of follow on from Christos's presentation and sort of dive into a little bit more detail about one of the science clusters in particular, and that's called SHOC, and that's the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cluster. And I want to share with you a bit of our experience of onboarding our services to the EOSC and how that all happens. And DARIAH is also in the EOSC Future project looking after this service integration. So what Christos just said about this vertical service integration, we're trying to help facilitate that as well within the EOSC Future project. So I'll say a couple of words about that as well. So you've just seen this slide in Christos's presentation. SHOC is one of the 5 science clusters that are involved in EOSC. And to dive deep a little bit more detail, so SHOC, the project comes to the end at the end of April, and then will become a more sustainable science cluster going on from the project onwards. So on the left-hand side of the screens, some of you will know the S3 infrastructures, and all of these are the landmark infrastructures. So we have SESTA, who has been leading the SHOC project from the social sciences. So that's the Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives. We have Clarin, who is really looking at language technologies in the area of social sciences and humanities. DARIAH, where I come from, which is for the arts and humanities. And then we have the European Social Survey and SHARE, which are very much looking at survey-based research in the social scientists. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got all of the newcomers. So many of you may know that there is something called the S3 Roadmap. And the S3 Roadmap is where newcomers to the research infrastructures are. So for example, we have a number, so just pick out a couple. So we have operas who are looking at new forms of scholarly communication for the social sciences and humanities. We have resilience, where they're working on religious studies. And for example, we have ERIC, who are looking at heritage science. So that's just some of the examples of the new infrastructures that are joining the SHOC cluster. So as SHOC, what did we first do? So the first step was really a pragmatic step. We needed to register as an EOSC provider. And here you can see, and I think the slides will be shared later, at the bottom of the slide, there is the link to able to become an EOSC provider. Interestingly, it's important that you're a legal entity. So for example, the SHOC cluster is not a legal entity, but of course the underlying infrastructures are. So each of them could choose which services they wanted to provide. So we all started to become providers in the EOSC ecosystem. So to just give 3 examples here from the whole cluster, DARIAH, here you can see where we've become actually an EOSC provider, and here you can see in the EOSC marketplace, you can see the DARIAH provider, you can see the SESTA provider, and then you can see the Clarin provider. And here on the right hand of the side of the screen, you can browse the various resources, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So that is the first step, being able to register, and you need to be a legal entity to become a provider in the EOSC ecosystem. So once you're a provider and registered in the portal, and just to say, this is our colleague. So together with Christos and our colleague Matt from EGI as well, we are all working on this together in work package 6 of EOSC Future. So our colleagues from EGI are responsible for the onboarding process. So for example, becoming a provider within the EOSC ecosystem, or also providing resources, sharing your resources such as services, data, and other research products. So here, this actually comes from a video that our colleagues from EGI made about actually how you onboard the service. So here you can see you have to fill out all the basic information, and this is really to help both users in understanding what the services you are offering, but also points of contact, for example. So if you've got a technical issue with the service, that it's easy to get in touch with, for example, a help desk of somebody to be able to help you use that service. So here are a couple of examples. So I've just done it in the same order as before. So DARIAH was onboarded as a service provider. And then one of the first services that we onboarded was called DARIAH Campus. And this is a discovery platform for training and education material in the arts and humanities. So if you're interested in using digital methods within the arts and humanities, you can find a lot of high quality open access training materials there in DARIAH Campus. So that was one of the first resources we decided to offer via EOSC. Secondly, from SESTA, this is the Social Sciences Data Archive for Europe. SESTA decided to onboard their data catalogue, which is a one-stop shop for search and discovery of social sciences and humanities research data. So some of you may know that SESTA is made up of various national nodes with their national social science data archives, and the SESTA data catalogue brings all of these archives together to make them discoverable at the European level. And finally, from Clarin, they have something called the Language Resource Switchboard. And this is a web application that provides access to a number of language analysis tools for specific data sets. So if you're into linguistic research and language technologies, this is a sort of overarching catalogue where you can find access to all the different tools that you can use to analyze the data in many European languages. So here you can see on the right-hand side, so once you've searched in the EOSC catalogue for what you're interested in, you have direct access to the resources that have been onboarded. And I think it takes a little bit of time to get used to it, and you have to think about your services in a slightly different but more sustainable way. And then it's quite easy to onboard these services into the EOSC catalogue. And this is one of my favorite services. So this is actually at the SHOC level. So the ones I've just shown you are at the levels of the individual research infrastructures. But here in the SHOC project, something called the SSH Open Marketplace was delivered. And this is a tool where it's a big catalog where data sources, tools, workflows in a very much a similar way that Christos was just explaining, training materials, data sets are all integrated into one discovery interface. So any of the things you're interested in within the social sciences and humanities, you can find them there and find people's experience, the training materials, and later we also hope to be able to link the publications that have been produced using these tools and data sets as well. So this is something that we onboarded together. Here you can see, because the technical lead of the SSH Open Marketplace is DARIAH. So we are the organization that put it into the EOSC portal, but also if you search for SESTA or Clarin, it also comes up as well. So it's easy to access, and then you can have direct access to that particular service via the EOSC portal. So now sort of diving into a little bit more technical detail of what Christos just referred to as the service integration. So here he mentioned vertical service integration, and this is how we connect each of the services that have been onboarded either via the research infrastructures or via the science clusters to the core of the EOSC. So here, this is with many thanks to the EOSC core team, and I think it's Mark van der Sonde in particular who produced this slide. But here, if you start at the left of the slide, we've got something called the EOSC AAI Federation. And that is the single sign-on to be able to connect to, for example, if you sign on and you have access to various resources, if you're signed on via the EOSC AAI Federation, you only need to sign on once, and then you have access to the various different EOSC resources that you are permitted to access. Also, we have other things like the monitoring, that's here in the middle. This is a tool to help the service providers. So for example, if I've onboarded like the DARIAH campus, for example, the monitoring service is offered to all of the services within EOSC, and it just checks whether the service has been up to date, how much uptime, have you had interruptions in the service, and in the future, if there is a problem, the monitoring platform will notify the service provider to say, hey, we have been monitoring your service, but it's been coming up with errors. Maybe it's good to have a look at that. Also, the help desk, for example, if you want to provide help and support via the EOSC ecosystem. So for example, DARIAH, Clarion or System will have multiple resources within EOSC, then they could provide a help desk so that those queries coming from EOSC could be easily redirected to the person who could help the researchers in using those. And I just want to mention one of the other core services that is currently being developed are these accounting services. These may be very interesting in the future once, for example, the data sets have been onboarded into EOSC. So for example, accounting for products can actually produce open science metrics. So it can show all of the data related to the open science of the research infrastructures and the services that are being provided. Also, there is another service, accounting for services, where we are actually publishing. It will be able to provide access to how many people have been actually using your service via the EOSC interface. Oops, it's not moving, apologies, there we go. So if these are the different ways that we can integrate research services with the core services, I just wanted to give a couple of detailed examples. So here, this is what the SHOC marketplace, this is the SHOC one that I presented a little bit earlier, which is the catalogue of all the tools, services, training materials and data sets, workflows, etc. Here, this was one of the first services that we integrated, and here you can see it's possible to sign on using the EOSC AAI and all of the AAIs that you can access that service. So it could be a DARIAH, for example, AAI, the single sign-on via a DARIAH login, or for example, I work at Ghent University, I would also be able to log in with my Ghent University account. And this means that if these service providers become part of the EOSC AAI Federation, that if I log in and have access to multiple services within the EOSC, I can simply, the technology happens behind the screens and I don't need to log in each time. Then another one, we talked a lot about the monitoring service. So for example, here is the monitoring dashboard from the SESTA data catalog, which was one of the services that we've onboarded earlier. And here you can see that they've got 100% availability and 100% reliability of the service. However, if any of the services were to go down, this is where you can be notified and help to improve your service offer for the researchers, because if a service goes down at a critical time in a researcher's experiment, this is not something that they're going to help the researchers to be happy. Just a sort of talking about EOSC Future in particular. So Christos is looking after, together with Christina, who is also in the audience, is looking after the science projects. DARIAH and other colleagues are working on this integrating of research services. So research services are, for example, like the SHOC marketplace or the SESTA data catalog, and core services are like the EOSC AAI or the accounting. And as Christos said earlier, without these interconnections, enabling this interdisciplinary data-driven research is very difficult. So these are kind of the essential building blocks enable to the beautiful workflows that Christos showed to enable that to happen. In order to do that, we're developing currently in the work package 6 of EOSC something called the Service Integration Roadmap. So what we're doing is we're reaching out to all of the science clusters, also in looking at the science projects that Christos mentioned, because these are really the way to demonstrate the value of EOSC to the researchers. And then what we've got to do by the end of the project is to be able to do 30 different service integrations. So what we're doing is trying to help bring the research service providers together with the e-infrastructure providers such as EGI or GEONT, who provide the EOSC AAI service, and help facilitate that relationship and help these services to be integrated. To help that process, the service providers of the core services are developing a series of core service fact sheets. This is quite kind of like high-level documentation to help explain to the research service providers what the core service does. So for example, we just talked about the monitoring. There it's very clear we can see and apologies for the background noise. There we can see exactly how the monitoring service could help the service provider in making sure that they're aware if their service goes down. So if you're any of the research service providers from some of the clusters out there and are interested and curious about service integration, please get in touch with us. That's info@DARIAH-EU, and we can help you in this process. So just to finalize, all of this service integration is absolutely crucial. And I just wanted to refer to the science projects that Christos went through in a little bit more detail. After all, we're not integrating these services because we're completely technologists and just want to interconnect things. What is really important is that we're trying to facilitate interdisciplinary research. So by connecting the different data, tools, services, workflows within the whole EOSC ecosystem, we can help make this better science happen. And just one last note from a point of view of the social sciences and humanities, it's been really crucial to be involved in the EOSC. We're able at the highest level, EOSC is a very high profile service and platform within the European research data landscape. And it is helped by participating in EOSC that we are able to be part of this high policy formation. And for social sciences and humanities, which are sometimes seen as the smaller social scientific disciplines, it's been really valuable to be able to be part of this conversation. And secondly, we are very different to CERN or some of these large synchrotrons or out there. We've got very different needs. So being part of this EOSC discussion has been crucially important to make sure that the needs of the social sciences and humanities are recognized within the EOSC ecosystem. So thanks very much for listening, and please feel free to get in touch if you're interested in SHOC or service integration. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Sally. I see that we already have one question in Slido. So someone's asking whether there's a guide or some guidance on what counts as a service or a resource. And they're saying that they have smaller and more task-focused tools. They're not sure whether those have a place in EOSC. Sally or Christos, any opinions on that, or are there any rules?
Maybe I can try and respond to that. So great question. Thanks very much. In terms of having services in EOSC, they need to be relatively mature. So I don't know if people have come across this technology readiness levels or TRLs. So I think it needs to be TRL 8, which means that it is a mature service and it's not going to go down. I think that is the point of view. However, of course, from in research communities, there's a lot of bottom-up work going, a lot of experimental tools out there. So each of the science clusters often have a catalog, such as a software or tools catalog. The SHOC Open Marketplace is one of those. And this could be where you can also list these kind of tools if they're not quite ready at the TRL 8 level. So they're still experimental, so you won't get 100% uptime. So you can also have them visible in EOSC, but at a kind of a different level as well. I hope, I don't know if Christos wants to add anything further to that.
Yes, please, if I may.
Oh, sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my explanation would be, more on the terminology. As a service, it's any kind of software or code, if you like, that helps the scientist to carry out a task, and that task can be small or it can be large enough. It can work, on a scale which is, I don't know, microscopic, or at a scale which is, at the universe. So all of these are services. A service would be, for example, a piece of code that calls some kind of data, or a piece of code that can analyze a huge time series of data, for instance, and produce a map with the results, and produce, statistical results, and produce any other type of results that they help the scientist to accept or reject the hypothesis she or he does.
Yeah, I think I can give a specific example there as well that has shown up in previous presentations, something that will be onboarded by September, I think, because it's in the open research graph, was a data scraper for Twitter. So something that queries the Twitter API. Those are not hugely complex pieces of software, specifically, I think, because this was something that was being run from the command line. So I think that is a relatively tiny tool. It's also something that most programmers could do themselves if they put in the effort, but it's still nice to have it made by someone else already and to have it in EOSC. So I think, yeah, they can be tiny as long as they have use. If it's, I mean, if you code like a birthday wishes to one of your colleagues, that's probably not something for EOSC. I think that the reason it goes in EOSC or not is it something that is useful to other researchers? And if it is, can be tiny.
And maybe I could just clarify. So a colleague from task 6.1, Montserrat, who's in the audience as well. She's, I don't know if you want to if you were able to say that, but during the onboarding training yesterday, it can be that some of the TR services can be TRL 7 as well.
Yeah, I think the distinction there specifically is it can be TRL 7, but if you want it to be integrated into the EOSC core, then it does need to be 8+. We have a new question there, again about services, and services is in between quotation marks, so I'm not sure what that means, but it's about services that consist of standalone software. Would they be hostable or listable on the EOSC portal as well? I see Sally. Yeah, go ahead, Christos.
Yeah, that's another issue. Normally by the term services, we mean services that can be accessed through the web. However, there are multiple techniques in converting the standalone code, into a service which is accessible, by through the web.
Yeah, and I was wondering there whether there's a distinction between hostable and listable, and whether that's important. Maybe Sally, I think you were nodding.
Yeah, I think services, I like the services is in inverted commas, because I think in EOS technology, there's the terminology, there is resources, and then there is research products. So for example, software could be a research product as well. So it doesn't necessarily, so it could be something like what Christos's example, you've done some experiments and you've created a good script in order to be able to make a certain data workflow reproducible. If that is documented, that could be onboarded as a research product as well to help the research process. So it doesn't need to be, there is the services, but there are software that are not necessarily services. I'm not sure I'm making this easier, but that these could be software products that have come out of research, and it would be valuable to share those with the community that somebody could maybe reuse them, for example.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sally. I hope that's clear. If it's not, don't hesitate to follow up via Slido. There's a question from Mark Allen, who asked, how does the accounting work? We have services already onboarded, but all the monitoring of the use of the services service is internal. Is there someone that can speak to that, maybe in the audience? If not, yeah, go ahead, Sally.
I can try. I'm not an expert, but I think there's two things. There's accounting and monitoring are two separate things. So I think the monitoring is actually at the sort of service uptime level. So that is done on a behind the scenes by, I should imagine, pinging the service provider to make sure that everything is up. Accounting, I went to the accounting, so this is a newer service, and I think there's two kinds of accounting for the products and for the services. One, they talked about sort of usage statistics and this kind of thing, and emulating usage behavior, but also related to the open science nature of things as well. So I think it's, we will have to double check the guy. I will just check his name in the program afterwards, but we can certainly put you into contact with the person who is dealing with the accounting. I think they said that their accounting services would be ready by the end of this year, but we can definitely give you the name of the person. He gave a presentation on Tuesday, I think, about the accounting services.
Yeah, and I think I can actually do one better, which is we have all those sessions uploaded to YouTube. So the ones from the first day are already available. So if you go and have a look there, you'll see in that playlist, you'll find the session. I think it's in the session on the EOSC core. Yeah, it's in the session on the EOSC core. So if you watch that session, you'll find a presentation there of both the monitoring and the accounting services that showcases what can be done right now and upcoming developments in the coming months.
And my colleague Montserrat is being very helpful in the chat. We think it's Christos Arvanitidis from GRNet who talked about the accounting, so he may be the person to contact.
Yeah, it's Christos, and then I think Christos does either the research products or the services, and then there's someone else doing the other one. But
if I may, I can see, many questions which are on the clarification of the terms. There is a vocabulary in EOSC. There is a glossary which is published online, and therefore the people can consult it. This is a product that is going, already a long way. It has been bequeathed somehow, from previous projects, and now it is updated.
Yeah, and I'll post a link to that glossary in the chat as well. I'm just, I think someone.
I hope it's that one, I think.
Yeah. And whether we should have a more formal definition there, we're trying to move towards that, but it's something that is very difficult and maybe also not desirable for us to impose top down, because we've noticed that in different disciplines and just in different languages, people have different words for these things. And so I think there will always be a bit of a gray area there, because just we're all coming from different disciplines, but we also speak different native languages that define these things differently as well. So I think there will always be a bit of a weird vocabulary gray area, and I don't think that's necessarily something that we'll get rid of. especially not in the long run. We're trying to harmonize that, as the glossary shows, across EOSC projects and across people speaking about EOSC. But even there, we've had speakers here this week that were not really related to EOSC projects, but just providers on the portal. And we've noticed there as well that they use widely different vocabulary, and that's sort of, as a linguist myself, something that I'm happy to live with. I'm just going to see whether there's any more questions on Slido.
It is evolving. It's a kind of a system which is alive, and therefore it is also, you know, somehow it has also the ability to evolve.
Yeah, and I think what we should also avoid is that we have, from my perspective, this is really a personal perspective, that we have very strict definitions of that we use, that are used by everyone that is in the know for EOSC, and that someone that doesn't know EOSC yet comes into that and is like, I don't know any of this vocabulary and I'm not sure what it means. And I think EOSC is already a very vocabulary heavy area, speaking as someone that is new to it and has been learning abbreviations for the past year. So I think it's, in the end, not that problematic in this case to have it be unclear, as long as people have a good idea of what they can onboard. And I think there as well, the edges of that are not super defined of what can be onboarded and what cannot be onboarded and what can be onboarded in the future. So that's sort of the space we live in now. I don't see.
However, if I may,
go ahead.
The linguistic issue lies right in the foundations of the interplay and collaboration between the science clusters and the infrastructures.
Yeah, it does. And I see why people find it annoying as well. Are there any more questions? Because we've gone a bit over time, and we need to start letting in people for the next session, where I'm hoping to see some of you again. That is a session on commercial providers. I don't know whether any of you are working for a commercial company that wants to onboard something, or just want to see what is possible for commercial providers and the role that commercial providers play in EOSC. Earlier this week, we had a discussion about whether commercial providers should be part of EOSC. That is an open science project, and I know that there's very outspoken opinions about that. So if you want to learn more of the role about the role that they play in that, and how we're trying to marry open science and commercial provision and procurement, please do join the next session, which will start in about 10 minutes. And I really want to thank Sally and Christos for their informative presentations and for answering your questions. And I'm hoping to see then some of you in 10 minutes. Have a very nice day, or join us in 10 minutes. Bye-bye.